Okay, well, Kyoto Koto, everyone. My name is Kanat. I am one of the Auckland branch committee members. Unfortunately, Dr. Olga Lazova had another commitment, so she couldn't join us. So she asked me to step in her stead. But I'm delighted to welcome Amani Nusebe, who is a director of Optimal Consulting and is a renowned enterprise PMO consultant. Amani has delivered many complex projects for well-known organizations such as Qantas Airways, BHP Billiton, Vodafone, University of South Wales, and many others. Amani's PMI roles included Sydney chapter president, co-chair of PMI Ethics Member Advisory Group, and PMI chapter's conflict mediator. So Amani is a recipient of the Fellow PMI Australia Award and the PMI Australia Distinguished Contribution Award. So it's our honor and pleasure to welcome Amani. So without further ado, Amani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kanat, and thank you, PMI New Zealand, for this opportunity. It's great to have another engagement with PMI New Zealand. I'm a member of PMI New Zealand chapter, as a matter of fact, and I've been actively building bridges with volunteers from PMI New Zealand since I started as a PMI Sydney chapter events director, as a matter of fact. And we learned from PMI New Zealand a lot in terms of running PMI Australia conference as a first conference in 2013. So thank you for this opportunity. So what are we going to talk about today? I want this to be an engaging one. So I will ask you to put in the chat a few things, and Kanat here will be helping us in terms of moderating what's the conversation would be. The very first thing I want to start with is paying respect. I'm conducting this presentation from my home in Sydney. And as you would know, the very first thing we do in Australia is really paying respect. So I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the land from where I am meeting with you today. I recognize their continuing connection to the land and waters, and thank them for protecting this coastline and its ecosystem since time immemorial. I pay my respect to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all First Nations people. So the Gadigal people are inhabited within Sydney, especially in the area where I are. Opera House and Sydney Park are these pictures of which I can claim credit for both photos. A snapshot about me, as Kanat mentioned, I've been a PMI volunteer for a long time. I've been on the ethics group. I've been a recipient of the Distinguished Contribution Award, the PMI Australia Fellow. Presented in numerous occasions, whether it was events, whether it was conferences on a local, national, Asia Pacific, and a global level, as well as participated in non-PMI conferences, on panel discussions and so on. So what are we talking today about? We're going to talk about conflict in the context of project management. We all have conflicts. Every day we might face a conflict, whether in our family environment, in our friendship environment, or in our work environment. So let's try to understand conflict and what role does it play in project management. Are there any resolution strategies that we can apply and transform that into opportunity, and look at certain applications and examples, and then opening the floor for Q&A session. So the very first question for you guys, can an organization exist without conflict? Let me know. What are your thoughts on that? Can an organization exist without conflict? Let's hear from you in the chat, please.
So we have a few answers saying no, absolutely not. No, people have different opinions, probably not. A dictatorship, maybe. Yes, providing they have processes in place to prevent. And another no.
Yeah. Excellent. That's really great response. Yeah. Organizations that do not have conflict, do you know what happens? They die. Why? Because the conflict is really the different ideas, the different approaches, the different ways to do things. And if we don't have that variety and that discussion, ultimately organizations die. It means, as one mentioned, dictatorship, and it means the organization doesn't grow. So definitely, this is my call for you to embrace that conflict as a mechanism for growth, as a mechanism for leadership. So the other question is, reflecting on your last work conflict, what advice would you give yourself?
Listen, difference of opinions are normal, whereas conflict comes from the passions. Step back and listen, walk in the other's shoes, take time to understand the drivers of other stakeholders, learning opportunity, stay calm, make more of an effort to understand objections, try and explain sides and perspectives, resolve the conflict amicably.
Excellent, thank you. That's really a good variety. So it's very important to try to detach our emotions from the situation. However, we're emotional being, regardless of what we say. And in our emotions, we have either fight or flight or freeze. But the question is, can we just step back and listen to the other person, put ourselves in the other person's shoes in order for us to have a more productive conversation? So let's have a look. So what is the conflict in the context of project management? So it's a state of discord caused by the actual or perceived opposition of needs, values, and interests between people working together. Of course, to have a conflict, you have to have at least two sides, if not more, that have opposing views, but also it's the perception of these opposing views. Sometimes we think that's just because someone make a comment or they not on board that they are opposing what we're trying to do, and that might not be the case. There might be other reasons for that. Conflict can take many forms in organizations, and particularly for our topic, it's a task conflict, it's a relationship conflict, and it's a process conflict. So what other sources of conflict there would be? Miscommunication. I tell you something, then you might misinterpret what I'm saying, or you might not like the approach that I'm taking. Different priorities. My priority is to list the tasks that we want to do. Your priority is to get on here and doing it. A source of conflict. Resource allocation. We're all project managers, program managers. All of a sudden, a critical resource we have, all of a sudden is taken away and put on another project. What do? Or we don't have enough resources, so we overburden our current resources with the tasks in order to finish our project. The other one, personality clashes. Oh, I just don't like that person. Really? Why? And this is another thing that we have to reflect on ourselves as we deal with it. Or poor management practices. Management isn't communicating. We don't know the strategy. We don't know what's the approach should be. We don't know the priorities. How do do our projects align to that strategy? If we are required to prioritize, what is the criteria to prioritize, and so on. The other one is mental health and anxiety. We all go through ups and downs, and we all have our own feelings, circumstances, situations, environment. But also sometimes some people might be seriously not feeling well, whether it's a mental or a psychological that we need to deal with. And therefore, the ability to deal with conflict would vary, would be less inclined to face conflict, and they would be maybe just accepting what it is while the build-up is happening where they are disengaging. And this is another area where we need to make sure that we pay attention to. So when we understand these causes or the possible causes, it enables us to manage the conflict better. And once again, my message is really, when you see a conflict or differing ideas, differing areas of interest, differing approach to tasks, accept it, embrace it. So, quoting Khalil Gibran, if I accept the sunshine and the warmth, I must also accept the thunder and the lightning. Or Albert Einstein, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And this is how we need to look at it. And the question becomes, can we transform that situation that might cause us anxiety into an opportunity to build more bridges and enable growth for the team and innovation? Going back to the types of conflict in project management, we talked about task conflict. When does it arise? When there are disagreements between the content and outcomes of tasks being performed. Process conflict occurs when there are disagreements about the logistics of task performance. Do I do this first or do I do that next? For example, a typical one in project management, documentation. Do I document what I want to do, or I document it after I do? And I'm sure if you're in a team that tries to do it in an agile way, you will have that conversation at which level the documentation will be required before versus after. Relationship conflict, personal and disagreements based on personal dislike or interpersonal incompatibility. Look, this person's approach is to stay quiet. They're introvert. I'm an extrovert. I want to talk. Oh my God, they're not engaging. Maybe they're not comfortable talking to a big group. They're better on one-on-one. Let's not assume. Remember, assuming makes an ass of you and me. So let's remove our assumptions and try to understand the person we're dealing with, their values and their needs. Resource conflict, another one where there are disputes over access to resources such as time, money, or materials. You're working within a program, the program manager starts moving resources or moving sometimes the budget from one resource to another. And I had that a few times, of course, in my career, where I would go to my boss and say, well, I've been asked to make a chicken soup without the chicken. You tell me how I'm going to cook. Bottom line, you really need to have that conversation, regardless of how difficult it is. So the very first thing I would encourage you to do when you see that opposing views, opposing ideas, is to reflect on yourself. What can I do to make this better? Or what can I do to help the other person understand my point of view? Or what can I do in order to get to the outcome I want to get? What's the purpose of the conversation I want to have in order to be able to frame it in an approach that is outcome driven, removing the personal thing and focusing on the object, or focusing on the task, focusing on the process itself. And the question here for you, do you stay silent when conflict arises? Whether it's a conflict with yourself or it's a conflict with others. Let me hear from you in the chat.
Pause before reacting. Yes, but I shouldn't. Usually verbally respond. I start by listening, which could be perceived as staying silent. Observe and make options. Listen and act accordingly. I like to be able to take the time to think about my response rather than being put on the spot. I discuss respectfully with the associate if conflict arises and try to reach a conclusion. Depends on the situation. If you must speak, act calmly or speak calmly. Don't talk just to speak, and a couple more. With others, get involved. Stay pretty silent when it's myself and someone else, though. It's about having the right type of communication with the right person at the right time with the right preparedness content. And the last one is realistically show silent but not inside laughing out loud.
Great. This is a good variety of answers. And as a consultant, I would say the answer to this one, yes, it depends on the situation. Now, if there's a conflict where you're afraid of that confrontation, you might want to sleep on it before you have that conversation in order to think about framing the conversation in a way that take out the personal thing and focus on the outcome, the objective of what you're trying to achieve. But if you're the project manager and you see a conflict in between your team members, do you step in or do you watch? And when do you step in and when do you watch? My advice is there are times where you have to take action and take action instantaneously. Is the person that you're watching bullying another team member? If they are, this is not a time to sleep on it. You really need to take action. Why? Because just letting it go is sending a signal to your team members that this behavior is acceptable, and it's not. So if you see that, you really need to take action immediately. If there's something that the team members can work out, then you might want to mediate that. You might want to invite them to cool down, have another conversation for another time, sleep on it, or even present yourself as someone who's going to have a meeting with both of them in order to engage them in a more productive way that will enable the exchange of ideas. So once again, it really depends on the situation, and staying silent in certain situations is not on. One of them is bullying, and the other one is lack of performance. A person who's not performing well and dragging the team down. You might want to have a conversation with that person in order to understand the reasons behind that lack of good performance. And the question becomes, is it a temporary thing or is it an ongoing thing where they lack the competency, the skills, and the expertise? Do they need a little bit of help? Do they need a better understanding of what you're trying to achieve, or the project, or the objective, or the environment? Or they're just lazy? And remember, people who are chronicle non-performer would try to create conflict in order to distract us from what we're trying to achieve. And these things need to be dealt with quickly. Of course, you need to understand the situation. Sometimes some people are under stress because of a family situation, God forbid, a death in the family, and so on. And therefore, you need to give that leeway at least. However, lack of performance and the case of bullying need to be dealt with as soon as possible, if not immediately. especially bullying, immediately, I would say. My computer froze. Okay. So the question is, just like anything else that we do in project management, is there a decision-making framework for choosing the right conflict resolution strategy? Okay, we talked about dealing with things instantaneously, but what strategy do we have to frame that conflict and then resolve it and then reflect back on it? You will see that this framework resembles a number of other frameworks that we practice in project management. And I'll ask you which ones it reminds you of when we finish. So the very first thing, define the conflict. You need to clearly identify what the issue that is causing the conflict, of course. Understand the needs and interests of all parties involved. And remember, we all have different needs and different interests. Even our needs change on a daily basis or according to what stage we are in life. Today, I want to engage with you guys. I want recognition. In a few years' time, I want to retire. So my needs and my interests would be completely different according to the stage in my life, what's happening in the environment, who am I, and what interests me. Analyzing the situation is our second step. What is the issue very critical and is it important? What does it mean for you? For example, if the issue is not that important, you're dealing with the person one day and that's it. It's not going to have any sort of critical impact, neither on the project nor on the engagement. You might want to let it go. Doesn't matter. We do that sometimes if we reflect on our family and partners, the choices. I want to go on holiday. Do you want to go to the beach? Do you want to go walking, hiking, and so on? You might be, okay, it doesn't matter. Let them choose and I'll just tag along. It's not that critical. That's it. I have interest in both. The other one is relationship importance in terms of how important is the relationship between the conflicting parties. Is it critical? We're in a team. The relationship is very critical between team members in order for them to be able to continuously engage. And that's where we weigh how we want to deal with the conflict. The other one is power dynamics. What is the power dynamic between the conflicting parties? Is there a stakeholder that's a senior versus a team member that we need to deal with? Or is it two peers on equal footing in terms of their contribution and their responsibility and accountability to the project? The other one is the time constraints. Is there a time constraint that needs to be considered? Why time constraint is important? Because sometimes if you've got the whole time in the world, you might want to work on the conflict slowly to build up to a resolution. But if the time is critical, there's no time. We talked about bullying. We talked about lack of performance that impacts the outcome. I'll give you another example in terms of a conflict situation. Two firefighters stepping into a fire. Do they have time to resolve who's going to attend to what? Nope. Each one will just directly go into what they need to do, regardless of where they're heading. So it's very important to understand the time factor because time is a luxury in this situation. The other one is evaluating conflict resolution strategies. There are 5 well-known models. They're called Thomas Kilmann conflict management model in terms of what we can do. Avoidance is the issue trivial or unimportant. Accommodation. I accommodate the other person because maintaining harmony in the relationship is very critical to the continuity of the relationship. The other one, competition, is quick, decisive action needed. We talked about the firefighters. We talked about bullying. We talked about lack of performance. Compromise is the other one. Is it important for all parties to have their interests partially met? You want to maintain the harmony within the team, and yet you want to please everyone. How do you do that as the project manager if a conflict arises, while maintaining that you need to achieve the outcome? It's another question in order to know to answer. And once again, it depends. It depends on the situation. It depends on what they're trying to achieve. The other one, collaboration. Is the issue and the relationship important? And is there enough time and trust for open discussion? And this is where time is needed, more time in order to get to the collaboration. But the question is, do we have that luxury of time? And is it worth investing in terms of the conflict we're attending to? Of course, once you decide on a strategy, you want to choose it and implement it. And as usual, once we implement something, we need to evaluate it. What is it? What's the outcome? Has our approach worked? Or what we would have done differently? And what are the lessons learned in another statement are? So remember, like there are, in that conflict model, you've got the assertiveness is higher when you move from avoiding to competing and from accommodation to collaboration, while the cooperative element goes higher from avoiding, of course, to accommodation and from competing to collaboration. Time and the situation will enable you to dictate which strategy works best. There are common mistakes that we need also to avoid. Avoiding the conflict completely is a no-no. Why is that? Can someone tell me why it's not good to avoid the conflict? If you can put that in the chat, that would be great.
So a couple of answers, because the conflict will still be there. Issue may be back later in a severe form. Garbage does not improve with age. Doesn't address the issue. It's still an unresolved issue and will return. Nothing will be resolved. Conflicts don't get resolved by ignoring.
Yep.
Lack of trust in management impacts team harmony, could cause financial impact. Team members can become demotivated. Project is negatively impacted. And there was a question, can you explain with an example how avoidance can help in conflict resolution? And I guess some of these answers would help with that question.
Yep. Avoiding doesn't help, and I would encourage you not to avoid, unless, as I said, it's really very trivial and there's no long-term relationship, or it doesn't matter for the outcome you're doing. But in general, you still need to have that discussion. Avoiding a conflict will create resentment. It will fester. It will have disengagement, and performance also will drop down. So very important when you've got, remember our conflict in the context of project management is about different ideas, different approaches, different processes, different priorities. That in the context of project management needs to be resolved. Everyone needs to know their responsibility, their accountability, their asymmetrics, their contribution, and who's going to be informed and who's going to be supported. So the defining the roles is very critical. And making sure that the team is on the same page in terms of the outcome that needs to be achieved is very critical. And therefore, the conflict that happened within that context really need to be resolved. As a matter of fact, I tell you, use it, do not diffuse it. Why? Diffusing it or avoiding it is not conductive of a positive outcome. While using it in order to make that exchange and to get better ideas, or to get the team to have better understanding of each other in order for them to work in a more harmonious environment is critical. When is it good to avoid? I would say when it's really minimal impact, not good. We do that, as I said, with our partners sometimes. We do that with a friend we meet every blue moon, or when we try to not have a discussion that will result in negative outcomes for something that doesn't make sense for us. I'll give you an example for me. Like, okay, every one of us come from a different culture, come from a different background. The moment I mention where I come from, I might be asked some political questions. Do I really want to bring that into a team? I would say, look, this is a discussion for another time, and I move on. I'm trying to avoid that conflict. However, it doesn't impact the project. It doesn't impact the outcome. It might impact the person trying to build relationship or bridges, but I need to be careful. So I was told when I started my career, two things you don't discuss: politics and religion. So avoid that in a work environment in order for us to focus on what we need to focus on. That doesn't mean that there are times, especially in our world right now, about what's happening, the wars, the conflicts that are happening, the impact on human being, where we don't need to address it on a humanistic level. On the contrary, we need to touch base with our team members to have that conversation and to let them know that we've got their back. If they need some time off because of what's happening, that's fine. Mental health, psychological health is critical to team performance. The other one is jumping to conclusions. Never jump to conclusions. Jumping to conclusions is embedded with assumptions. Once again, assumptions we learned in project management makes an ass of you and me, sorry, but I need to remind people of that. And I usually even put it on a piece of paper, break it down in order for people to get the picture. The other one, as we mentioned, focusing on personalities instead of issues. Now, there's a tendency when we say you. Remember when we say you, and as I'm pointing my finger, there are 4 fingers pointing to me. So try to diffuse that in terms of focusing on the object itself, not the person. What are you trying to achieve? Is it the task? Is it the process? Is it the priority? Is it the idea? That's what we need to focus on rather than the characteristic of the person that we're dealing with, because we are all different. And even if we are today this way, tomorrow we might be in a different way. So let's focus on the issue that we're trying to resolve. Forcing a solution. If I force a solution on someone, how would they feel? If someone forces a solution on me, I would feel resentment, lack of engagement, switching off completely, and productivity definitely will be impacted. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be able to give my ideas next time in order for us to improve what we're doing. Stay quiet, passive aggressive. And we've got a lot of that. So be careful about forcing a solution. The other one is neglecting follow-up. We've already devised an approach and a solution. We had the discussion. We thought, we resolved the conflict. Some conflicts aren't resolved by one conversation or one action. And therefore, neglecting follow-up would mean people might still have some residual resentment. There are other things that came up as a result of the discussion and then following a certain path. So following up is very critical. So we want to start with some examples or another framework in order for us, okay, how do we have the discussions? I've attended a webinar for these 2 guys, Karen Hurt and David Dye, and I want to reflect on the model they have. They've got a book called 300 plus phrases of master any workplace conflict. And I love their model because it frames how we want to engage with that conversation in order to resolve the conflict. So their model have 4 dimensions for a productive and collaborative conflict resolution. The very first one is connection, okay? The second one is clarity. The third one is curiosity. The fourth one is commitment. Let me go through each. Connection. Do we have one another as human beings? Do I have your back? Do you have my back? Regardless of how challenging the situation are and how we're already discussing different ideas or my idea is better, we need to respect the person. Remember, PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct have 4 values: respect, responsibility, fairness, and honesty. So in terms of having each other as human beings, that's the respect element. And it's very critical. We're respecting each other. We're respecting what we want to achieve. The next one is clarity. Do we have a shared understanding of success? Are the objectives clear for everyone? Are the priorities clear for everyone in terms of successful outcome, in terms of what the project is trying to achieve, or within that phase, what we're trying to achieve? Very important, because that will frame the conversation. Curiosity. Are we genuinely interested in the other perspectives and what's possible? So when we talked about reflecting on the last one, so many of you said, listen. Yes, so this is the curiosity. I am genuinely interested in your ideas, in listening to you, in knowing what your perspective is, in order to know what the possibilities are for us to reach a solution. And I want to listen. Genuinely interested. The fourth one, commitment. We had the discussion. I respect you. We know what we want to achieve. I've listened to what you want to say, and then we want to reach an agreement. You listen to me, I listen to you, and then we get a commitment. And remember, like, this is what we do as project managers. We document the action that we want to do. Who's going to do it, what, by when, and what help they would need. So connection, we talked about it. We know one another as human beings, respect. Examples of connection in terms of the model. Tell me more. It sounds like you're feeling, for example, blue. Is that right? Or I care about you, about the project, about the team, and I'm confident we can find a solution as we can all work together on this. Very important. So these are examples of a connection statement that you can start with. You can have your own, and that book has so many phrases that enables us to use. Clarity, we said we have a shared understanding of success, what we're trying to achieve. Examples of clarity statement. What would a successful outcome look for you? Maybe a successful outcome looks for one team member completely different than the other. Some people are more humanistic about things. Other people are outcome driven. I want to achieve this. I don't care about the price. But you want to have that conversation in order to understand how you can get to that solution. Or what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, and Z. Do I have that right? Or let's start with what we agree on. This is another important framework, starting with what you agree on. They say Barack Obama does that in terms of leadership. His leadership model starts with what you agree on in order to build that trust and build that conversation. Curiosity. We are talked about genuinely being interested in other perspectives and possible. So what statements do we have? I'm curious how this looks from your perspective. What do you suggest we do next? I'm curious. What can I do to support you right now? That's another thing. You want to achieve this. Maybe I want, okay, let them achieve what they want to achieve in the way they want to achieve it. As a project manager, maybe I'm more interested in the outcome rather than the process or the approach. And therefore, what can I do to support you right now? Yeah. Fourth one, we said about commitment, a clear agreement. What's one action we can both agree to as next step? Remember, sometimes the first conversation might not result in a resolution for that conflict. So maybe you want to schedule another time to talk about this, or let's sleep on this today. I'll come back to you with more ideas, or let me think about your ideas and I will come back and reach a resolution tomorrow. But have that time identified. Don't let it fester. Don't sleep on it for a long time. It's really critical in order for you to achieve what we want to achieve. To recap, we've agreed on this. Is that your understanding? That's another way of commitment. So here are the different statements put together as examples in terms of connection, clarity, curiosity, commitment. I will play this put this slide as we go through examples that I want you to formulate the sentences for as a model. And this one is the first. You have a teammate who crushes all your good ideas. Every time you say something, they put you down, crush your idea. Oh, this is stupid. Oh, no, this is not good. This is so on. So what do you do to have a conversation that will resolve that conflict using this model? Let's hear from you in the chat.
Curiosity. Another curiosity, clarity.
No, okay, just to make sure that what I'd like you to do is try to use the model in terms of the 4 statements, the 4 corners, the connection, start by making the connection, then clarify what you're trying to achieve, and then the curiosity, and then the commitment. So we're trying here to apply the model. Sometimes you might use 3 items of the model rather than the 4. But what I'd like us to do is really try to apply the model on that conversation.
So here's a good one, clarity. What is it you didn't like? Sorry, but I'm still lost.
As in lost how to apply?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say I'm going to formulate it myself. Okay. That person is crushing your ideas. You want to start having a conversation. We said that the very first thing is to connect with that person. We say, look, it sounds like you're not liking my ideas. Why don't we, for example, meet in order for me and you to discuss these ideas in terms of what we're trying to achieve? And I'm curious to hear your opinion about my ideas in order for me to be able to formulate it or approach it in a better way. Why don't we meet tomorrow, for example, at that time? So let me see what I have in the slide. Applying that, we want to connect. I'd like to explore this with you. Or, for example, would you be open to hearing my idea to dramatically reduce X, Y, and Z? Or I imagine you have concerns about these ideas. Here is what I recommend. For example, you want to move from connection to clarity. Here's exactly how we can make this happen. You want to move from clarity now to commitment, because when you connected, you showed curiosity about discussing the idea. Commitment, here's the support I would need from you. Can we do this? Very important. So we moved from connection that has some element of curiosity to clarity and then to commitment. There are other models where people say, 2 things, vulnerability and curiosity. So curiosity is very important. And it's very critical no matter what model we look at, in terms of, I want to hear you, I want to listen to you. Your ideas and the conversation are critical to me in order for us to reach a solution. Here is another example, and I hope this will be better in terms of using the model. You are overwhelmed and need to say no to new projects. Your boss keeps dumping things on you, and you want to know how to address that in a way, once again, that depersonalize it. It's nothing personal, but makes you achieve the outcome in terms of focusing on what you need to focus on to achieve. So here is the model. Let me see what statements from the model, from connection versus clarity versus curiosity versus commitment, you'd like to use in order for you to have that conversation with your boss.
While folks are typing their additional comments, there were three more comments in the chat regarding the previous question. The first is appreciate your effort, but this is what I'm looking for. The next one is connection 1, clarity 1, curiosity 3, commitment 1. And the last one was thank you for sharing your opinion. I'm curious as to why you think that. Can I clarify my opinion for you? Can we reach an agreement on why I want this?
Yeah, this is really great. The last one is excellent. Once again, remember, it's not only the I, it's the you. So there are two elements here. And we want to show interest in the you before I try to focus on the I. Very critical here. We all want to be heard. We all want to be appreciated. And building bridges by not imposing, by recognizing, acknowledging the other side in order to listen, absorb, and maybe a completely different idea or a different process would come out of that conversation.
So the comments that are coming through are, it sounds like we've got some important projects coming up. Can I clarify the priorities of work we have on? How can I manage resource constraints? Can we meet to review the plans? So the next one is, I understand we have a large amount of work to deliver together. Can I get clarity that there are no other ways we can achieve this? I'm curious that I could be overwhelmed by taking more work on. Is there another way together we can achieve this delivery? And the last one so far is, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed. Is that right? What can I do to support you right now? What I'm hearing you say is that you want me to prioritize this over that. Is that right? To recap, we had agreed to X. Is that your understanding?
Yep, excellent. So a better use of the model from the examples that we've read. So let's see what the book has suggested in terms of. So I'm deeply committed to the success of the group and to this project. What you're asking me to do here would mean, for example, we're deprioritizing all of these other projects, which concerns me because, for example, we committed to the stakeholder, we're committed to this timeline, and an alternative approach might be, once again, in terms of discussing the priority, ensuring that the stakeholders are on board, and so on. So, yep, excellent use of the model, and that's really great. So, after any conflict, we said we really need to check that the conflict has been resolved. So, measuring the success of a conflict resolution is measured by a number of factors. The time it takes to be resolved. Is it recurring? Is that conflict happening all the time? And you think you've put it down, you've had solution, everything is really running well, but all of a sudden that conflict comes back. You see your team discussing back once again the approach or the architecture or the documentation. So what's happening and why it's reoccurring. The other one is team satisfaction. Of course, like an unhappy team is a non-engaged team. It impacts performance, it impacts the team dynamics, you need to watch that, and of course, individual growth. So it's the appetite to work together and the whole demeanor of the team. Very important to watch these as signals in order for you to ensure that the conflict has been resolved. Remember, we're project managers and we need to be proactive about these conflicts. So for us, we need to frame that. Kick-off of the project is an excellent time to set these sort of boundaries, to open that dialogue. So setting clear expectations in terms of behaviors, in terms of conversations. Once again, PMI, Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, respect, responsibility, fairness, and honesty. Establishing communication guidelines, creating a team charter, encouraging open dialogue. Maybe you also want your team to have conflict resolution training. And of course, building a relationship, doing some activities, getting the team to know each other, asking questions, puzzles, and so on. Having the very first 5 minutes of your meeting to have a conversation about what people are doing in their life, what are their interests, what they've done as a hobby, what they've done on the weekend. Very critical. The other one is we all come from different cultures. And this is very critical in terms of understanding how we address the conflict. Some cultures, and I don't want to generalize, but still we try to make it as understandable for us in order to deal with as possible. People have different norms in terms of dealing with conflict, and some would run away from conflict. Remember, once again, fight or flight or freeze. And some people don't want to engage at all. They hate it. But we need to express ourselves. And once again, if we go to the model in terms of caring, vulnerability, how do we feel about it? And then the curiosity, very critical in terms of understanding where the other person is coming from and their preference in terms of that. So respecting that in terms of cultures, adapting the approach that we're trying to apply, and seeking help if needed. Everyone has HR. If you don't know how to deal with the situation, you don't know what the cultural norms are, maybe you need just to go to talk to HR and get a better understanding, talk to the person. The other one is really clear and effective communication. Think that immediate attention to signs of escalating conflict. Remember, we talked about the measures, but here, once again, increased emotional intensity. People are getting more agitated, they're angry, you look at their face, they're not happy, there's frustration, they're making very negative comments, the passive-aggressive way, personal attacks on the person, avoidance or withdrawal, decreased productivity, increased complaints. They come and talk to you and say, X, what did that? Why did that? I'm not happy with this. Or formation of cliques. And this is where there's gossips and conversations, the kitchen and the tea area and so on. Very critical to observe that, which means conflicts are not getting resolved. They need to be addressed and immediately have an action plan in order for you to use that conflict to move it to a productive stage. We talked about these. Here is a case study, but this you might face this in every single project that you've got. You're trying to get to the result of the project, producing an outcome. However, someone else have a different priority because of their strategy, because of their KPIs, and so on. And things might not align. What do? You have a conversation. You try to understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to achieve in order for you to reach a solution that enable more productive relationship and enable both to achieve, if not all their goals, at least partially their goals to the optimum way. So here are the key takeaways. We try to understand what conflict is. Look at conflict as a challenge and opportunity where our leadership will shine. We want to move it from a conflict to an opportunity to build bridges, innovate, and have better outcomes. The role in terms of having a productive team, having growth, having creativity, having exchange of ideas. Look at which strategy we're going to apply. We apply it. We use the four corner model, and we look at cross-cultural considerations as an element within that resolution. Once again, let me quote Khalil Gibran and say, no matter how long the storm lasts, the sun always shines behind the clouds. Very critical for any time that you feel down. There's always sunshine coming. So that concludes my presentation for today. And let's talk about what questions do you have? What ideas do you have?
Well, Amani, very good presentation. Thank you very much. We have quite a few thank you notes coming through the chat. People are very appreciative of your presentation. And I guess the fact that we had over 40 participants is a testament to that. I guess, you know, 2 cents from my side. Your presentation definitely resonated with me. I remember over 25 years ago, I had a professor at university. His name was Dr. Edward Back. I still remember his words. He said there are two kinds of problems in construction that are difficult to deal with. The first kind is people problems, and the second kind is big people problems. And over the past 25 years, I've found his, you know, uh, guidance to be quite right. So thank you again very much for this wonderful presentation. We have another comment saying, thank you for insightful presentation, and practical strategies were very helpful. So thank you very much for that. We will share the recording via YouTube, and stay tuned for the other sessions that are coming up. Thanks again very much.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's a pleasure. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please send me an invite and I'll accept. Yep.
Oh, for sure. You'll see a request for connection from me today. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Kanat. Thank you. Thank you kindly. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.